Diaries, which is full of juicy observations of New York in the 1980s. She's the founder of the Women in the World Summit. So, Tina, I did the Hollywood read on your book. I went to the index. I looked up Donald Trump. And, oh, man, what I found. Put up on the screen what I thought was absolutely prescient from 1987. This is what Tina Brown wrote in her diary. The Art of the Deal, which has a crassness I like. In the end, the only thing about self-serving books like this is, do they capture the true voice? There's something authentic about Trump's bullshit. Anyway, it feels, when you have finished it, as if you've been nose to nose for 4 hours with an entertaining con man, and I suspect the American public will like nothing better. I mean, I love the assessment. I wondered as I read it, what do you think he'd think of that?
Well, he might well think it's right, actually. I mean, the Trump of the 80s would have probably agreed. You know, the Trump of now, oh, my God, he's way more serious about himself. But at the time I met him, you know, he was just a great salesman. And he was funny about it, actually, at the time, for a while. Not, as you see in the later part of the diaries, I start to have a very different point of view about him. But then he was fun.
Well, and would there be a President Donald Trump? And I don't want to put it all on your shoulders, for better or worse, but without the celebrity culture that you chronicled through Vanity Fair and the other publications, would he be where he is today?
Well, you know, we really mirrored, you know, and kind of developed and turned into something sort of iconic, I guess, the rise of celebrity culture. But I can't say we were responsible for it. We had an actor in the White House as I took over. But, I mean, it is the obvious offshoot of that time, that the rise of celebrity culture led to reality television, led to The Apprentice, led to the White House. There's no question that that arc begins in those years in the 80s.
You have him in 1991 taking umbrage, that's a soft way of explaining it, at something published in Vanity Fair, I think over a year prior, and dumping a drink down the...
Yes, he did. Well, what happened was that we published a very kind of skeptical, you know, critical, deep dive into his financial chicanery as we saw it. And, of course, this crazy tawdry divorce. And we basically kind of did a piece that took that whole thing apart. And the author of the piece, Maria Brenner, was sitting there at a benefit, you know, at the Tavern on the Green, but 8 or 9 months later, and she felt something cold and wet and slimy down her back of her dress, and she looks around thinking it's the waiter, and sees Donald Trump just having emptied a glass of wine down her back, scooting off across the room without daring, in a sense, to confront her. Very interesting, because it shows, A, that he kept this great grievance burning all of that time. Secondly, that he doesn't really like confrontation either, which I think is true today as well.
So to bring this full circle in this era of the reckoning in which we live today, what if an event like that were, as you wrote, were to take place in 2017 going into 2018? Would that individual be hoisted by their own petard?
Well, of course, this was pre-viral. This was pre-social media. Right. So I think you know, this write-up appeared in, you know, Liz Smith's column, and it was certainly taken up everywhere on TV and so on. But it didn't have that kind of huge national, wild social impact that happens, you know, today in the internet age. Undoubtedly, it would have been a huge explosion then. But also, that piece did say, and this is why he was so furious, actually, that he kept the speeches of Hitler on his desk. And that was what made him crazy, because it was a very, very interesting thing that Marie Brenner had observed, which is that, you know, he had this volume right there on his desk at Trump Tower.
Tina, let's talk about that website I made reference to a moment ago. How do you feel about being able to go to a place and having aspersions cast on an entire TV show or an entire movie project when there were a couple of bad apples? And are they worthy of professional death sentences? That's really my question.
I do not think the shows are worthy of professional death sentences. I mean, quite honestly, if you start to take that view of all the creative artists, actors, directors, etc., who've been involved with the project, you wouldn't see anything on the air. There will be nothing on Netflix if you took that view. And I don't think it's really fair to the people working there. You know, I mean, there are a lot of people who are going to go down as collateral damage, which I don't think is correct. I think that's wrong. I think that the individuals can be called out, but not the shows. That's too far.
Mario Batali, one of the names that recently enters the mix, and via social media, he posted an apology. Interesting, he says, as many of you know, this week there's been some news coverage about some of my past behavior. I've made my many mistakes. I'm so very sorry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, P.S., in case you're searching for a holiday-inspired breakfast, these pizza dough cinnamon rolls are a fan favorite. Your reaction?
I would say, how about pigs in a blanket, Mario? How about that? How about that delicious British suet and raisin dessert, spotted dick? Sorry, but Mario, this ain't the right kind of apology. I don't think this is where it's at. Pigs in a blanket, Mario.
You were a boss in the industry at age 25 and beyond. Did that position of authority at an early age spare you from being on the receiving end of sexual harassment?
Well, quite honestly, it is true that the best way to keep sexual harassment at bay is to wind up being the one in charge, right? So it's true that I had all kinds of other frustrations and other senses of being demeaned, but sexual harassment wasn't one of them because I was able to define my world from 25 years old. I was a boss lady. I was an editor-in-chief. So the more women we have in positions of authority, doesn't have to be the boss itself, but in middle management and across the board, on boards of companies, etc., the more you're going to see that atmosphere of bro culture, if you like, gets blown up. I mean, it isn't an accident that there were 10 men on the Weinstein Company board. I mean, no women at all. So it's like there isn't any kind of sense of how women are thinking or reacting to things in so many positions of authority in so many places. And that's when it all goes wrong. When women are just sort of an add-on or, a sort of borrowed interest. That's when it really goes awry.
Is there any risk of reaching a point that you desire, I think that we all desire, when there are more women in those management positions, that it continues, except it's now the women who are the perpetrators?
Well, that can happen too. I mean, there's no doubt that power can corrupt anybody. And this is about power. And there's no doubt that, it's about inequity and power that creates situations where one kind of victim is created. And I'm sure that there are, obviously, as power changes. But let's put it this way. It's pretty unlikely or somehow outlandish to think of, I don't know, Senator Lisa Murkowski putting her hand down somebody's pants. I mean, there is something different, perhaps, about the way women are wired or take their positions of authority that is not, going to lead to this mass kind of abuse of it. Obviously, there are going to be women who do abuse it, and we have seen women who do that. I mean, horrible stuff with teachers and so on, abusing it with young men. But, I mean, right. I really feel that, in terms of management, the problem we've had is it's been so glacial. I mean, it's all very well. There's all of this talk and all of these men CEOs go to Davos, for instance, the big World Economic Forum in Switzerland that's coming up in January. And they all make these speeches about we have women in the pipeline. Well, frankly, that pipeline is exploding right now. Women are sick of being stuck in that, quote, pipeline. They've been in that pipeline now for years and years.